Long-time lurker, first-time poster. A little background here. I'm a 22-year-old female, and I come from the US, but I'm currently living in Germany for a work-study program. I'm traveling alone, but I'm fluent in German, and I've always been fairly confident in my ability to live alone and defend myself, considering that I stand at about 5 feet 11 inches. I also carry 3 different forms of self-defense on me at all times. I've been here for a little over a month, and I absolutely love everything about it, besides this following experience. This happened to me roughly 3 weeks ago. After exploring my semi-large home city in Germany for a few weeks, I wanted to check out a nearby country. I've always been jealous of how Europeans can travel to countries like Americans can travel from state to state, and my dad generously offered to pay for my travels while I'm living here, so I wanted to take advantage of that and experience a different culture. After doing lots of research, I decided upon the Netherlands. I've always been curious about Dutch culture, and I was very excited to do some more exploring, even if it was only for a weekend. I chose a small city in the south of the country, so I only traveled about 4.5 hours to get there. I had some lovely Dutch food and got to experience the Saturday market in the city center, which was filled with local goods. But now, on to the juicy part. On my last day in the Netherlands, I decided to check out a local Dutch coffee shop. Most of you probably already know, but some Dutch coffee shops sell weed for recreational use and have areas where you can smoke and talk to people. Since I've never been to anything like this before, I was super excited as well as nervous. I smoke relatively frequently back home, so I wasn't exactly heading into this blind. When I walked in, I had to register for an account, and the staff took my picture and passport and gave me an account number. I was a little uneasy about this, considering I didn't want my passport and a coffee club account to go hand in hand. But I've heard that several coffee shops do this, so I wasn't exactly super worried. I then went to the counter and bought the weakest strain they had, White Widow, which in some circles is a hallmark strain back in the US. Also, it was only €5 for a half gram, so that was pretty damn fantastic in my book. I didn't want to bring the bud across borders because I didn't want to risk getting torn in half by the German Polizei. So I decided I'd find someone to smoke with and grab a train back to Germany afterwards. It was only about 1:30 in the afternoon as I made my way to the chill zone, a hazy room filled with foreigners and locals, all ripping bongs and dragging blunts. Amongst quite a few 20-something-year-old men, I see 2 girls sitting alone at a table for 4, and I ask if I can join. They happily oblige and we start chatting. They introduce themselves as Alex and Jen. Both of them were Germans, and when I mentioned that I'm from the US, they got super excited and started gushing about how awesome California must be. I almost didn't have the heart to tell them that I'd never been. Not even a minute after I start talking to Alex and Jen, some lanky, freaky-looking boy lurks over from a different table and says, "Oh, you're from the US? We were just talking about how we wish we could afford to travel there." Immediately after saying this, he sits down across from me, despite the fact that nobody invited him to. Looks-wise, this guy appeared to be anywhere between 25 and 30, relatively scraggly, with big, hazed-over brown eyes, shaggy brown hair, and a very large mouth, of which was always slightly ajar. Though he was a bit unkempt, he seemed relatively normal despite inviting himself to pop a squat with us. Lurky Boy starts asking us normal questions. Where are you from? What do you do for work? How do you like the Netherlands? Blah, blah, blah. The way he spoke was slightly slurred though, as if in addition to smoking, he'd been drinking. But I couldn't smell alcohol on him, and he didn't seem drunk. He was consistently hard to understand though, with an accent that was possibly Dutch. For a moment, I thought he might have a mental disability, so I didn't want to be rude to him and say that I couldn't understand him. It also occurred to me that he might just be attempting to flirt, and failing miserably at it. So I really didn't see him as a threat. I mostly nodded at what he said or threw in a "yeah, for sure," here or there, while Alex and Jen were relatively quiet. Something about him though was off-putting. I just couldn't put my finger on what it was. After a few minutes of barely coherent conversation, Alex asks Lurky Boy if he can roll us a joint since none of us know how to. He says yes and offers to grind our bud. We give him the go-ahead, and he suddenly takes all of it and leaves the chill zone to grind it at the bar. This is where I start to get concerned. Tons of people in the chill zone had grinders right in front of them, and there was no reason for him to leave to grind our bud. I began to worry he might put something in it. Alex and Jen both admit that he freaks them out too, and I decided to keep an eye on him through the glass door, though he had his back to us. I'm closely watching him when he turns around and gives me this wide, toothy smile, almost like he was laughing. This instantly sent chills down my spine. He continued to stare directly at me, smiling, as he spent the next 10 minutes grinding and rolling our bud. Lurky Boy wanders back in and hands us each our small bags of bud, and then grabs a paper to start rolling. I'm not shitting you when I say that he took 30 minutes to roll one loose, horrible joint. His hands were shaking the entire time, almost violently. I started to wonder if he was on something else. The joint immediately falls apart, and he asks Alex, who was sitting directly next to him, to lick it and fix it. He's smiling and staring intently at her as she's about to lick it, and she says, "You really don't have to watch me do it." He responds again with some incoherent jibber-jabber as I turn to the girls sitting behind me and ask if they could roll a joint for me. They do so in less than 5 minutes. This dude's shitty joint falls apart about 3 more times, and we decided to just smoke the one that the girls had rolled for us, as we all wanted Lurky Boy to get the hell away from us at this point. I come up with a half-assed plan as we light it, and I say, "Hey, we appreciate you helping us, but these are my friends that I haven't seen since the last time I was in Germany, and we really just want to catch up and have some girl time." Seemed nice enough. Lurky Boy responds with, "You guys can talk with me right here. I don't have to leave." Alex immediately repeats the same thing that I said, phrased a little bit differently, and he says, "I'm staying here. You can pretend you're alone and just talk with me here." At this point, alarm bells are starting to go off. Lurky Boy isn't leaving, and I can't think of anything to say to make him go. Jen has been quiet almost the entire time, just staring at the table, but Alex is starting to realize that we really need to do something. Alex says to him, "Please, we don't want to be rude. We just haven't seen each other in so long, and we really want to catch up one-on-one." Lurky Boy aggressively shoots back with, "How did you all meet then? Where did you meet? In what city? Why are you all friends?" And then directed at me, "Why were you in Germany, and where were you?" Fuck. Now I need a real story, or at least one convincing enough to shoo him away. I say something along the lines of, "I was visiting X big German city to find an apartment for an upcoming work study, and I met them in a pub. We started talking, realized we had a lot in common, and decided to stay in touch, since I knew I wouldn't have a lot of friends when I moved here." Sounds legit. Lurky Boy nods and seems convinced enough. Alex immediately follows with, "Can you please go back to your friends so we can all talk?" Lurky Boy says yet again, "I don't need to leave for you all to talk." He then says we should start fresh and ask me, only me, what my name is, while extending a shaking hand. Suddenly, every creepy encounter story that I've read on Reddit is starting to rush back to me, and I realize all of the things that I've done wrong. I told him where I work, where I live, told him where I'm from. But my name could be my saving grace. I blurt out a fake one, "Trisha." He repeats my name back, nods, but doesn't ever tell me his. Now I've reached my limit. We tried being polite, but to no avail. We've spent over an hour dealing with this creepy-ass dude, and we've all had enough of it. I look him dead in the eyes and sternly say, "You're making us uncomfortable. Please leave us alone." Lurky Boy leans in until he's only a few inches from my face, his eyes almost quivering as he says in a quiet, low tone, "I know people at your work, people that are above you. You really don't want to mess with me, because I could ruin your fucking life. I could really fuck you up." As he says this, it's as though the slurring in his voice vanishes. I feel the blood draining from my face, and my head starts tingling. I almost feel like I'm about to burst into tears, or throw up. Maybe both. I quickly grab my bag and say, "I'm going to leave. You're seriously making me uncomfortable, and I really don't want to talk to you anymore." And then the final blood-curdling comment from him, "I think we'll be on the same train, now that I know where you live." It think it's time for me to go too. I rush outside in a panic, borderline hyperventilating, as Alex and Jen follow suit. We simultaneously say, "What the fuck?" and hurry away from the coffee shop. We end up exchanging numbers and going our separate ways. But now, for a slightly happier ending. After I sprinted to the train station, I realized that I had left my bag at the coffee shop. I honestly hesitated, as I really didn't want to run into Lurky Boy again. But I really wanted my 30 euros worth of useless goodies, so I ran back. I stood outside and briefly explained to the security guard what had happened and why I left so quickly. He said, "We saw what happened, and we kicked him out. I'm so sorry for that. He's not allowed back here again." And then the security handed me my bag. I honestly believe that without Alex and Jen there, things may have gone differently. I think Lurky Boy had some seriously fucked up intentions, and the only thing stopping him was the fact that we were all together. So to Alex and Jen, let's definitely meet again. But to the guy who threatened to follow me home and fucking ruin my life, I can't extend you that same invitation. This is my first ever post on Reddit, so bear with me. I've been reading everyone's amazing stories for years, and felt like it was only fair that I contribute something back. Allow me to tell you about the time I dated a guy on MySpace for 2 years, a time that nearly ended up getting my entire family murdered, me stalked by a psychopath, and everyone involved nearly losing their minds. I've never written this down before or told very many people that I even trust. It's all just too painful and, quite honestly, unbelievable to tell. If it didn't happen to me, I probably wouldn't believe it either, but unfortunately it did. I promise that what you're about to hear is 100% the absolute truth. Let me give you some background for the story. I'm an almost 36-year-old gay male who was born and raised in the Appalachian Mountains, which, for my friends not in America, that's in the South, more towards the mid-Atlantic region. I usually don't just throw being gay out there, but it's important to my tale and understanding why I made such insanely poor choices in my teenage years. I know almost everyone does, but this really takes the cake. Follow me back to when I was 16, almost 20 years ago now. I was a junior in high school, had plenty of friends, and no trouble with bullies, at least not while I was at school. My parents are now wonderful people who greatly regret the way they treated me when they found out I was gay. At the time, I hated them for being so horrendous, but as I got older, I finally understood that their reaction was just a product of the strict religious movement they and myself were brought up in. My parents, who at the time firmly believed that this would send my eternal soul into damnation, pretty much only allowed me to stay at our house a couple of days a week after that. For at least a year, I was living on my friends' couches and off the kindness of their parents. I was in what I can only describe as the worst state of miserable, a major depression that I've only ever experienced at that point in my life. I had tried to unalive myself the year before with a very serious overdose that cost me 9 days in the ICU. I should have died, but your liver is an amazing thing, and mine likely kept me from that fate. A year to the day after that, literally to the day, the first guy I ever fell in love with was killed in a tragic car accident. My parents, though, had zero sympathy for my feelings. They were the immoral feelings of their blasphemous son, so they didn't count, I guess. I remember coming back home from his funeral that night and my father asking me, "Why are you so upset? Were you with that boy or something?" I didn't even respond, just walked right past him and straight into my room where I proceeded to cry myself to sleep. Needless to say, this sent me completely spiraling downward in the worst ways possible. Drugs, alcohol, you name it, I did it. Anything to stay numb and keep myself from feeling the immense amounts of pain I was in emotionally every single day. To have your situation go from a year before seeing your father cry for the first time as you lay dying in a hospital bed, to him spewing so much malice and hatred towards you. Let's just say it was enough to make anyone have a mental breakdown. I had friends who cared about and loved me deeply. I don't know why that wasn't enough, but it just wasn't. I felt like no one truly loved me or ever would. Hell, if my own parents couldn't, then what were my chances with finding a soulmate? Would I just be alone forever and as miserable as I was then? At the time, and in my angsty teen mind, that's exactly what it felt like. In the midst of my deepest, darkest despair, the brightest idea anyone has ever had on this planet popped into my head. Well, if no one around here will ever love me, then I'll just go online and try to meet someone who will. Proud of myself for having such an ingenious idea, I immediately hopped onto MySpace and spent the next hour making it as badass looking as I thought I could. You could customize just about everything on your profile, so of course mine had to accurately reflect all my emo feelings and the darkness in my soul. It all started out innocently enough. I clicked on one of my gay acquaintances' profiles, and for some reason, this guy on his top 8 just flew right out at me. His name was Jacob. He was gorgeous, dressed in all black, and that was pretty much all I needed to know about him at the time. I saw he was from Maryland, several hours away from me, but far enough to possibly not be like everyone else here. Far enough to hopefully have exactly the kind of mentality that I was looking for in another human being. So I sent him a message. Something lame to the effect of, "Hi, what's up? I saw you on my friend's top 8 and thought you were cute, so I figured I'd say hello." I wasn't expecting a response, none whatsoever. He was so gorgeous and he seemed way too cool for me. So why in God's name would he message a guy like me back? And then it happened. Within a minute of me sending my message, I got one in return, and it was from him. Not gonna lie, I exploded in joy on the inside, something that I hadn't felt in years and years. It was just something like, "Hey, you're cute too. How are you?" But it was enough to send me over the moon. I felt alive again, but what I really felt was hope. We talked the rest of the day and night. We talked about each other, how much life sucked, how bad we wanted away from our hometown and our lives. You know, the usual for teenage gay boys living in repression. I fell for him hard too. We chatted for maybe a week before he asked me out. I had no problem with dating online. Hell, that was the whole point of me doing this in the first place. So I eagerly said yes. We had only been dating for a week after that or so when he introduced me to the rest of his friends. I met his ex-boyfriend Zachary and their best friend Josie, who I quickly became best friends with, along with about 10 other girls and guys. Josie was a cool chick, and she had known these guys for years. Who better to give me all the dirt on them? During the course of the next month, Josie and I became the closest of friends out of everyone that he introduced me to in what turned out to be a gang. They were mostly just a group of suburban white kids who called themselves the Elites and drank and smoked a lot of weed. I had heard some crazy stories here and there about them beating people up and some of them taking the gang thing way too seriously, but I didn't really think too much about it. Josie and I had been talking on the phone every single day and really made a genuine connection with each other. She had my sense of bizarre humor, was extremely intelligent, and still liked to have a crazy good time on top of it all. During this period, Jacob and I were doing great, but there was one little problem. I had started to fall in love with his ex Zachary the more that I talked to him. Jacob could be intense and at times violent when he was angry, at least from what I heard. But on the other hand, Zachary was his complete opposite. He was too kind for his own good, an extremely caring guy, and he wrote the most beautiful piano music that I had ever heard. Being a musician myself, French horn for 10 years, I was immediately endeared to this guy. The more and more time I spent online talking to Zachary, the less and less time I felt like talking to Jacob. Eventually, Jacob kind of figured out what was going on, and to my shock, he let me know he was cool with it and wished us the best. That's how, after about 2 months with Jacob, I started dating Zachary. This would be the guy that I would date for the next 2 years, and with whom the worst times of my life would be spent. Josie was clearly thrilled for me. We still talked every day online and on the phone. Sometimes I talked to Zachary on the phone, but more often than not, we just kept our communication to AOL Instant Messenger. When we started dating was when everything started to collapse. Jacob, who had initially said that he was okay with everything, ended up exploding. He completely tore me a new one online and then proceeded to go and kidnap my current boyfriend. Josie called me up freaking the hell out, saying he'd taken Zachary and no one knew where they were. This clearly sent me reeling from the shock. I guess all the rumors I had heard about Jacob were true, and now because of my actions, the guy that I'm in love with is in danger. I quickly contacted some of the older guys in the gang and let them know what was going on. Their response was basically, "Osh, not again," which caught me off guard. Again? You mean this happens frequently? I talked to Chaz, the self-proclaimed leader of the gang, while he sent some guys out to deal with Jacob and to retrieve my boyfriend. He basically told me in a nutshell that Jacob has been and always will be obsessed with Zachary, that when he gets wasted on whatever, he goes cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and sets out on some wild mission to kidnap and apparently violate my new boyfriend. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was in complete and total shock, but apparently this situation was resolved relatively easily, and he handed over my man without too much incident. He also received a healthy ass beating to remind Jacob that it's not nice to go around kidnapping people. This was the first, but certainly not the last, incident that I can remember where a pattern I'm all too familiar with now would develop over the next several years. Jacob would get drunk and jealous. He would do something completely insane to me or Zachary, and then after all the freaking out and worrying was over with, he would come crying back to me begging mine and Zachary's forgiveness. This became a weekly routine, and it began to wear me out mentally very quickly. Flash forward to around a year after I had sent the very first message to Jacob. I was still with Zachary, still best friends with Josie, who I had even been up to Maryland to meet in person at this point. Unfortunately, to miss my boyfriend who was out of town visiting family, and was still dealing with Jacob's craptastic, insane plots to ruin my relationship and give me a stroke before the age of 20. None of this craziness set off any red flags in my head, not a single one. As a matter of fact, nothing period during that entire year gave me second thoughts about anything going on really. The day-to-day, the sky is falling lifestyle had become the norm for me, and I was used to it. Several of my friends, however, had their doubts, though they were polite enough to keep them to themselves for the time being. This was when the first true danger that threatened me and my family ever arose, and it led to a night that I don't think I'll ever forget. Cut to me as a 17-year-old who in the span of 1 year had accomplished everything he set out to do. I had the perfect boyfriend, even if I'd never met him. I didn't care. I had an awesome new best friend in Josie. We hung out a few times at that point and I adored her. And I had joined a group of my own in my hometown. My parents were going to throw me away just because of who I loved. Well, then I was going to throw away every single religious thing I had ever been taught and go to the dark side. I became a Luciferian, otherwise known as a Satanist. I received a phone call one night around midnight from Josie, who was almost beside herself. Very out of character for her. I mean, hell, Zachary had been kidnapped over 40 times in the past year, and she had hardly batted an eye. But this was different. She explained to me that Jacob had really outdone himself and lost his mind this time. He had hired a guy from the elites named Sean to come down to my house and kill me, plus my mother, father, and younger sister. My sister is about 7.5 years younger than me, and from the day she was born, I've always been fiercely protective of her. She was, and still is, my beautiful baby sister, and truly the only one in my household that I loved at the time. When I heard that my ex had taken it so far as to hire a hitman to come after my family, I flew into what we around here call a mountain rage. I asked Josie when he left Maryland. She told me she found out that he'd started driving towards my house maybe an hour ago, and as soon as she found out, she called me immediately. Okay, so that meant I had at the most 6 hours to prepare, and at the least, possibly 4 if he got a good head start. She also informed me that Sean was a former army guy, but got kicked out for failing several psych tests and being a complete sociopath in general. I'm not a big guy, and at the time I weighed even less than I do now. I was 5 feet 7 inches tall and maybe 130 pounds soaking wet. But my first thought didn't require brute strength to beat back this attacker. I called up my coven leader Brandon, who lived not even 10 minutes away from me, and explained the situation. I told him that I needed to borrow his favorite toy, and I promised to bring it back in good condition, with as little blood on it as possible. He agreed. About 30 minutes later, I was back home in my room, cleaning and loading an extremely nice over and under pump action shotgun. Like I said, no brute force required. I called Josie back up and got the details on exactly what he and his car looked like. Then around 4 a.m., I told her I would call her back and crept out into my front yard. Now, for people who had never been to my house, they always got where to park at wrong. They always ended up in front of my house down a hill instead of in the driveway on the side. This little detail was stuck in my mind and probably saved my life. In the very front of my yard, there was a huge oak tree that was big enough for my skinny, girl jean wearing emo ass to hide behind perfectly. All I had to do was wait and hope he did exactly what I thought he would. I got so lucky. He parked exactly on the opposite side of the big tree that I was hiding behind. I heard a car door open and someone step outside of the vehicle, shortly followed by the unmistakable cocking of a 9mm handgun. While that sound may have struck fear in the hearts of others, it absolutely enraged me to the core. So I replied in kind with a sound of my own. As I stepped around the side of the tree, he was directly in front of the car, gun down by his side. In one motion, I simultaneously pumped a shell into the chamber of my shotgun and raised it directly level with his head, about 10 feet away from me. This must have caught him off guard and completely by surprise. I didn't hesitate. I simply told him the God's honest truth. I said, "Buddy, you've got one of two options right now. Either you get back in your car, turn around and drive straight back to Maryland without stopping, or you can so much as flinch in my general direction, and I'll splatter your brains all across my great state. You have 5 seconds to decide. What's it gonna be?" I kid you not. The most sickly smile spreads across this psycho's face, and for a moment I thought we were about to reenact the movie Tombstone. Fortunately, he had much more of a sense of self-preservation than I thought someone who had just driven 8 hours to kill a family ever would. All he did was give a little chuckle and say, "You're a cool dude. See you around." He then walked backwards very slowly, my gun following him the entire way, before he got back into the car and just drove off. Right then and there, I made up my mind. I had to tackle this beast head on. I had to go to my enemy Jacob's home turf and bring this war to his doorstep, just like he had brought it to mine. It was now time to go to Maryland. After all the drama of nearly being murdered by a nutjob, I'd really had enough of Jacob's BS at this point. I got online and cussed him out until a fly wouldn't land on him, making a point to let him know that his little plan had backfired. I told him he was going to regret the day that he ever crossed me and my boyfriend. Instead of apologizing like usual, his true colors finally came out. He laughed at me. He fucking laughed. He told me that I was cute when I was angry and said what a damn shame it was that I didn't have a bullet hole in my head. He wished I was dead and that he never spoke to me in the first place because he was still in love, more like insanely obsessed with his ex. He informed me that the war was just beginning and he would do everything in his power to win Zachary back like he was some kind of adorable trophy that you won for baking the best pie at the county fair. I was incensed, completely livid and brimming to the edge with fury. I told him to watch his back because I'm coming for him. I called Josie and told her everything that had happened and asked if I could come stay with her for a week. She excitedly agreed. Zachary was asleep for this whole ordeal and blissfully unaware that anything had happened. When he found out the next day, I think that he was even more angry than I was. Fortunately for us, the gang's leader Chaz liked Zachary a whole hell of a lot more than he did Jacob. So we hatched a plan with him. The idea was for them to kidnap Jacob like he had done Zachary so many times before. They would be accomplishing this task while I was on my way up to Maryland, and when I got there, he would be mine to do with as I pleased. I was going to inflict a maximum amount of pain on the guy that had caused so much in my own life, and I would relish every second of it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, my dreams of reviving the Spanish Inquisition on my ex's head never came to fruition. When I arrived in Maryland, Josie came skipping out to greet me, happy as a lark like always to see me. She had some good and bad news. I always asked for the bad news first, and the bad news was that Jacob had gotten tipped off by someone, and he knew that everyone was coming for him. He made a hasty retreat and had intended to kidnap Zachary and take him on the run too. But that was the good news. Before he could get to him, Zachary had hopped on a bus and headed to New York to stay with his mom while things cooled off. As sad as I was that once again I had missed seeing him for the first time, I was just relieved that he was out of harm's way, safe and sound. Again, no alarm bells going off that for the second time that I had made the trip up there, Zachary wasn't around. Josie called him on her cell, and he apparently picked up on his mom's because he never had his own, and we got to enjoy one of the rare times we actually spoke on the phone. All was well. Now for a week of fun and plotting on what we were going to do to Jacob the next time he reared his ugly head. Later that week, Josie convinced me to go ghost hunting on some abandoned railroad tracks in Maryland. We even invited Sean. Yeah, the same psycho who'd once threatened to kill me and my family. He claimed to regret it, and I played nice, thinking that it was safer to have him on my side. The rest of that trip went quietly, and so did the upcoming holidays. For once, things almost felt normal. But then came February, and everything started to unravel. Josie said she needed to get away from her parents, so I drove a 16-hour round trip to bring her back. My parents didn't want her in the house, so I paid for us to stay at a motel until they caved. Now at this point, I forgot to mention something extremely important earlier about my boyfriend Zachary. He was very sick. I mean, like terminally ill. But we didn't think the ultimate outcome would be for years. I was told that he had cystic fibrosis and needed a double lung transplant in order to live. And he was hospitalized for this in the beginning of February and rushed to the transplant list because his condition was so grave. Unfortunately, he was at a hospital in a part of the country that specializes in treating CF, and that was way too far away for me to travel. Josie kept me in pretty good spirits about the whole thing. She had a lot of experience with CF since her sister had died from it several years earlier. She reassured me that since he was so young and tried to take such good care of himself, that he would probably receive donor lungs very soon and be just fine. I tried not to worry too much, but in reality, I worried my ass off. Losing him after getting him out of harm's way so many times before was not an option in my mind. How could we have overcome so much only for him to succumb to this disease? Zachary and I talked constantly when he felt like it. And even though he was scared and alone, he said he felt like $1,000,000 knowing I was supporting him with my love no matter where I was. That made me feel wonderful being able to comfort him from so far away, and for a couple of weeks, my comfort seemed to be doing the trick. Until one day. That day. My boyfriend died suddenly on February 14th, 2008. His lungs filled with fluid. He suffocated and died. There was nothing that anyone could do. I was completely and totally lost. And Josie was the one that broke the news to me. She was still living with me at the time, so she tried to console me as best as she could, while she was shedding her own tears at the loss of her best friend. That forever ruined Valentine's Day for me, and to this day, it only reminds me of loss and death. You don't realize how fragile your heart truly is until you've experienced a loss like that. Little did I know that even worse moments in my life were about to occur less than a month later. I was headed on a course for total destruction, and still blissfully unaware of the one person who had been driving the train from day one. Skip forward to March. Josie had forcefully been returned to Maryland by her parents, seeing as how she had practically ran away. I was off in a la-la land of booze and drugs, and more pain than either of those could cover up. My alcohol tolerance back then was ridiculously high, so I had already drank an inordinate amount when my phone rang. It was Josie. I slurred my words as something to the effect of, "Hey girl, what you doing?" came bumbling out of my mouth. The next words out of her mouth once again sent my head spinning off into space and my world into complete chaos. Zachary's not dead. I stopped breathing for a moment, and when I caught my breath, I asked her if she could repeat that again. She did, except this time she added the fact that his life had been in danger, and that he had to even hide from me, just so Jacob thought that he was dead. Blah, blah, blah. I could literally feel my brain dripping out from my ears as my mind turned into mush with every word out of her mouth. Then, for the real kicker to my drunken mental meltdown, Zachary got on the phone. Sure enough, it was him. He apologized for what he had to do. I apologized for what I was about to do, which is scream and yell my lungs out. Throw my phone into a wall, smashing it into a million pieces. I was literally having a complete and total mental breakdown. Some good friends sat me down and started to tell me all the inconsistencies in their stories over the last few years. At first, I didn't want to listen, but then eventually there was too much evidence not to. Finally, I opened my ears and my mind to what was really going on. I decided to figure this out once and for all. I got on MySpace, this new thing at the time called Facebook, and every other social media that I could think of. I typed in Josie's full name into the search bar of every single one. What I found still makes me want to turn my stomach contents inside out to this day. There, on every social media possible, by using her name and the few email addresses I knew she had, I found dozens and dozens of accounts linked to her emails. Duplicate after duplicate of Zachary's full name on accounts with pictures of her, and the same thing with Jacob and every single solitary other person in the supposed elites. That's when, after years of denial and torment, it finally hit me like a railroad car full of bricks. She absolutely made up every single one of these people and has been pretending to be a dozen or more over the last 2 years. As you can imagine, my jaw hit the damn floor. Thank God I had some close friends that were there to keep me from falling apart and help me find every single fake profile she had created. I diligently copied every link to every single one of her profiles into my AOL Instant Messenger. Then I called her. "Hey, how are you?" "I'm alright, I guess. Just bored. You?" "Nope, definitely not bored over here. Get on AIM Chat, and I'll show you something really interesting." I was nearly hysterical at that point, and I could tell she knew that something was up. Once she was online, I simply asked her, "Hey Josie, what are these?" Then sent her the link to every single fake profile she had ever created in her miserable life. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening as I heard her clicking through link after link. Her 2-year-long mental game was now over, and she finally realized it. Her words? Well, fuck man. Guess you got me. Catfish the show or movie wasn't around way back then, so I had unwittingly become one of the first hardcore victims of a stalker in the internet age. Worse than that, I had talked to, lived with, and even befriended the girl who had been stalking and trying to ruin my life for over 2 years. It was literally, and still is, the single biggest mindfuck I've ever had in my life. Thousands upon thousands of messenger conversations, thousands of hours on phone conversation, countless amounts of cash being spent to drive up several states away just to stay with my psycho stalker every single time, even bringing her down to live with me for months. Everything was starting to make sense. There was no Jacob, no Zachary, and there was no gang. What there actually was one completely batshit insane girl with more mental problems than what could fit in an encyclopedia. She was the only person I ever talked to. She was the only person I ever saw, and even worse, she was the one that paid Sean to come down to my house with a gun and try to kill my entire family. Josie was the only person in these last 2 years that had orchestrated any of this, from all the fake kidnappings and boyfriend drama to faking the death of someone that I had fallen in love with, and then bringing him back just to screw with my head. Who the hell even does that? All of the events of the last 2 years came flooding into my mind as I realized in each and every one, it was only her. I deleted my MySpace and made my Facebook private. I only accepted friends that I knew were real. I fell completely off the wagon and out of my head. Drugs, alcohol, and even more drugs. That's all I could do to cope. Here I was, a gay man that had unknowingly fallen in love with a straight woman, and regardless of whether or not I thought it was a gay man, which I wholeheartedly did, that still fucks you in the head pretty bad. I didn't think I could ever be close to someone again. My world had been rocked and ruined, and to this day, all these years later, I still can't trust people. I don't think I'll ever be able to trust someone ever again, and can you blame me? After months of self-destruction, I knew that I couldn't stay on this path. I needed answers. I was going to have to talk to Josie again. As much as I wanted to scream at her, or even worse, I stayed calm. Not for her, but for me. I told her that I wasn't looking for reconciliation, just closure. She agreed to talk, and I finally got the chance to say what I'd been carrying on my back. That she nearly destroyed me, and what she did was one of the cruelest betrayals I'd ever known. And I had done nothing but care for her. Her explanation? This type of behavior for her started as a joke in high school, catfishing a bully with a fake online persona for revenge. But it grew She created dozens of fake profiles with names, backstories, and stolen photos to make them seem real. That's when I came along. She said that she meant to prank me briefly, but claimed she fell in love and didn't know how to stop. Whether that's true or not, I'll never know. If it was love, why choose to put me through hell? She admitted the music was hers. She was actually a talented musician. The male voice on the phone? Just some guy she paid. Sean? Also her doing. $500 to drive down and terrify me and my family for no real reason. The rest was all fantasy, built to keep my attention and to control my emotions. She went so deep into the lie that she claimed she started to believe it herself. After hours of listening, I'd heard enough. My life, my trust, and my sanity were nearly obliterated because she was lonely and craved attention. I'll never fully understand people who feed off of others' pain. Like I said, even now, almost 2 decades later, I struggle to trust. The idea of being that vulnerable ever again terrifies me. But I survived. I came out on the other side. I think stronger, harder, and more self-aware than I ever thought possible. I've learned to love myself, something that I obviously couldn't say back then. I don't need anyone else to validate me. And as awful as it all was, if I weren't someone worth obsessing over, she wouldn't have clung to me for years and moved her life just to be near me. She took a lot from me back then, but what I've built in the aftermath, that's mine, and that's something that she can never take away. When I was younger, it was just me, my mom, and my little brother, at least until I turned 14. Every weekday, my mom would drive about 30 minutes away to care for a family with 4 kids, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Then some nights she'd pick up an evening shift at a diner, even farther out. My brother and I were homeschooled, and we had tutors come in 3 days a week for about 4 hours each time. The rest of the time, we were mostly alone and unsupervised. Our nearest neighbors were a half a mile away, and we rarely saw cars pass by. 5 in a day was the most that I ever counted. We lived in a small, rundown house, and at the time we had 3 large dogs, 2 German Shepherds and a Belgian Malinois that a neighbor gave us when his dog had puppies. Our yard wasn't fenced, and we usually spent our days on the porch with a fan running, doing homework, or reading while the dogs played fetch. Every day after 5 p.m., we were under strict orders from my mom to bring the dogs in, close the blinds, and lock up the house. But sometimes when I was bored or the dogs had too much energy, I'd let them back out to play. Our house was tiny, and our yard was huge. One evening, knowing my mom was working the night shift, my brother and I decided to take the dogs out. He ran to the backyard to grab their toys while I stayed inside with the dogs, who were barking wildly. After a while, I got concerned. He was taking way too long. I stopped doing dishes, pulled the blinds back, and saw him outside talking to a man that I didn't recognize. The guy seemed desperate, urgently trying to coax my brother to get into his car. I panicked and started screaming at the top of my lungs. I ran out the front door, and all 3 dogs bolted out with me. My smallest dog, Totoro, though still 60 pounds, jumped on the man, knocking him down and standing over him barking. The other 2 dogs circled, barking like mad. I yelled for my brother to run inside, and in one motion, I grabbed Totoro by the scruff and yanked his tail to get him off the man. My dog whimpered in pain, something that I still feel guilty about, but he ran back into the house with all of us. I then shoved the dining room table in front of the door and sat on the couch with a kitchen knife, terrified. My dogs kept barking while I peeked through the blinds. The man, now back on his feet, stood outside looking furious, pacing and yelling in our direction. I thought for sure that he was going to try to break in. But eventually he drove off, and it couldn't have been more than 30 minutes before my mom got home, although it felt like hours. We told her what had happened. My brother said the man first asked for directions, then started asking more personal questions like whether he was home alone. The man then used the classic line that he had a puppy in the car and asked my brother if he wanted to see him. When my brother said that we had 3 dogs and offered to show them to the man then tried to lead him toward the vehicle. We drove to the neighbor's house and called the police. Officers came from the nearest town and questioned us, I was only 10 at the time, and all I could really remember was that the man was tall, white, and drove an old red car. I brought this up with my mom again tonight. After that incident, a police patrol car started passing by our house a few times a week. One officer, the one who took my statement, stayed in touch with my family. He actually became part of our lives. He'd join us for dinners, stop by during patrols, and eventually, we even spent holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas with his family. When I moved out to California a few years back, he adopted Totoro and my older shepherd, Ponyo, because our new apartment didn't allow big dogs. To this day, he's still a huge part of our family. I see him as a father figure, even though we now live 5 states apart. Sadly, he's sick now, liver failure, and my family is flying out to see him one last time later this week. That's actually what inspired me to tell this story. So to the man who tried to kidnap my brother, I thank you. Because of you, I met one of the most loving and important people in my life. I truly can't imagine who I'd be today without him.